With everything going on right now and the economy basically being propped up by the federal government, I thought now would be the perfect time to talk about how to stop living paycheck to paycheck. I know a lot of people say, well, you could just make more money or save a lot more money, but that doesn't necessarily help. And then when it comes to trying to save, it seems like for some reason, every time you get paid, you have no money. Combine those two things, ultimately you end up living paycheck to paycheck. So today I want to talk to you about 5 things that don't require you to just make more money to help you stop living paycheck to paycheck. So think of anything that you've ever wanted in life, that trip to Panama or that new car, or you just wanted a new pair of shoes. No matter what it was that you said that you wanted, you found a way to get it. Think of the time that you wanted to go to Panama for spring break. And you and your friends started getting together and planning everything, and this trip sounded so exciting. But then you looked at your bank account and saw that you had about $3. Now, it's January and the trip isn't until April. So you thought to yourself how easy it would be to raise $1,000 in 4 months. And during this time, you probably weren't thinking that you had to spend that money or that you were forced to save it. In reality, you probably felt good that you were able to save the money to get something that you wanted. So let's take something like a life goal, like buying a house in 10 years. Well, just like that trip, whenever you think about buying a house, you think about where you're gonna stay, the school districts, is it safe? Is it close to fun things to do? And those are things that you'd probably look heavy into maybe a few years before you actually moved. This is something that I realized no one actually asked themselves, but it's something that we all seem to understand, that we need money for a down payment for a house, but we never actually plan on how we're gonna get it. I know that we can all agree that going to college and getting a degree and a high-paying job will solve your problems. Because once you graduate, you can get a high-paying job right out of college and then work at this job for a little while and then request to move. I don't have to worry about income because you have a job. And most jobs will even pay to move you to this new place so you can work for them. Or you can start now and start small. And then you'll soon realize how much easier it is to raise $10, $25, $30,000 in 10 years than it is to work really hard within 4 to 5 years and raise $30,000. And when focusing on one thing at a time when trying to accomplish something big is a concept that's really well explained in the book called The One Thing. Now, the next thing after setting your goal that you want to focus on is creating a budget. And you guys know that old saying, when you plan to fail, you fail to plan? Yeah, that applies to your finances as well. And if you're guilty or have been guilty of any of these things that we talk about on this list, please give this video a like. And don't worry, it's a safe place because we've all made those same mistakes. Now, I know we've all experienced this one. And that's when it's payday and you go out to do a couple things and come home and look at your bank account and be surprised at how much money is there or not there. It's actually a very common thing because most people don't keep track of what they're paying for things. And I get it because there's so many things to consider, like discounts, multiple items. What if you have a rewards card? And for most people, they just assume that the amount of money that they make each month and the amount of money that they spend in bills is the difference. Most people have a margin of money that they don't even account for. The simplest way to figure this out is to ask yourself, how much more do you make than you spend on all your bills each month? And bills can be considered anything that you have to pay for. And I know a lot of people are guilty of this because they don't actually make a lot of money, but then you have to ask yourself, when will you become cognitive of your finances? Most people decide that they'll just worry about that when they're in their career and making a lot more money. Then they have that sad realization when they find out about something called compound interest. I know there's a lot of people out there that says, I don't have any income, so I don't need a budget. Well, sorry to burst your bubble, but if you've ever actually bought anything for yourself, you've had an income. If you're not consciously counting every dollar that you get, how do you know how much money you really have? And of course, this is a channel to help people increase their financial literacy. So of course, I'll be making videos about wealth building, budgeting, and savings accounts. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and be sure to give this video a like for the YouTube algorithm. One of the things that I want to talk to you about once you get a budget together is being conscious of lifestyle inflation. Lifestyle inflation is unfortunately something that everyone is guilty of. The goal here isn't to stop it altogether, it's to become conscious of it. Because most people are doing this and they don't even realize it. Lifestyle inflation, simply put, is when your lifestyle increases along with the amount of money that you're making. I get it. What's the point of making more money if you're just gonna live in the same dump you've always lived in? The point of this isn't to not do it altogether, it's to become conscious of it. Because what most people do is the moment they get paid, they start to spend money. Then they go back and look at it and realize that they spent money on a lot of things that they didn't need. People unconsciously buy things because they're just so used to doing it. And then they get paid a little bit more, so they add another thing. And I definitely understand the idea of going to college and then leaving college and getting your own apartment and buying your own car and just adulting. So the first thing you do is get an apartment. Well, you're no longer a college kid, so you can't sleep in those college style dorms. You got to get your own place and decorate that thing. And just like everyone else, you came straight out of college and got a high paying job. So along with that high-paying job, you now have to get a new car because you've been driving that same beat-up car since you were in high school. And before you know it, your new cost of living is only $45,000. Now, that doesn't bother you because you're just gonna get a raise in about 2 to 3 years. And once you get that raise to about maybe $100,000, the first thing you feel like you need to do is go buy a house. And eventually that continues until, well, your income can't increase anymore. And now you're making $200,000 a year, but unfortunately your cost of living is now $185,000 because every time you got a raise, you bought something bigger and better. And then eventually you realize the sad, sad truth that even with 6 figures, you still can't afford a Gucci belt. And this example works with all numbers, even if it's a couple $1,000s to millions of dollars. Because when it comes to being wealthy, one of the main fundamental parts of that is being conscious of your finances. Because if you don't want to decide where your money goes, there are plenty of companies out there that will gladly decide for you. Which actually ties together with this next point, which is live below your means. And personally, I feel like this one is the hardest one when it comes to focusing on your finances. This one's hard because most people who actually get to this point are only here because they're trying to figure out how they're going to pay for all of the things that they have. And everyone has their own reason for becoming financially conscious. But usually by the time that most people do, their lifestyle has already dictated where their finances will be. And you'll hear so many people say, well, just make more money or save money. But there's only so much money that you can save from not eating out all the time and cooking at home. And this also will be hard if you have to think of it as things that you have to sacrifice. Because at the end of the day, whenever you think of saving, you always think about the things that you want, but you can't buy because you're saving for something else. And this actually will tie back to the first point of just setting a goal. Because when you're living below your means, you don't actually think, oh, I have to save and I can't buy this, this, and this. You're thinking, oh, I get to save to reach my goal. For example, let's say that you became financially conscious because you were living in an apartment and decided that you wanted to buy a house. Then you start thinking about all kinds of things, like how much money am I actually making? Did you press the like button on this video for the YouTube algorithm? And how much can I afford to pay each month, including for utilities and water and repairs? And your mind will literally never stop asking you about all the things that you might not have money for. And this would be the point in your life where you decide to start a budget. And you start to see that you really only have about $400 extra that you could spare. And that's really why things like lifestyle inflation is something that you should be cognitive of. And you realize that sacrificing 5 to 10 years in your 20s or your 30s ultimately means that you have such a strong and powerful foundation by the time that you're 25, 30, or 35, or even 40, because now you have your entire life ahead of you. Imagine being 30 years old with $50,000 set aside that you can literally do anything with. Sacrificing 5 to 10 years of your life, no matter what age you are, may seem like a lot. And I know a lot of people have trouble with delayed gratification, and that's just something that will come with discipline and time. And in reality, about 90% of the time that you ever think about anything that you ever want, if you just wait a couple of days, then eventually you figure out that you want something else instead. Which actually brings me to the fifth and final point. And that's simply understanding the difference between an asset and a liability. And when it comes to millionaires, unfortunately, pop culture has it embedded into our minds that millionaires all look like this, or like this, or this. When in reality, millionaires look just like this. And just think about all the stories of the people whose lives were ruined from winning the lottery. When you think about people like Jeff Bezos, who's on track to become the world's first trillionaire, or Elon Musk, who's single-handedly trying to colonize Mars, you don't automatically think of these people with Cuban links and Lambos. That's just not how you think of the richest men in the world. Now, yes, they have very nice cars, private jets, and very big houses. And when you think of Jeff Bezos, you automatically think of Amazon and how much you use Amazon. And if that example didn't help you understand the difference between assets and liability, then I'll just give you the short definition, which asset is anything that puts money in your bank account and a liability is anything that takes money out. With that being said, some liabilities can actually become assets. So let's use your car or place of residence as an example. You pay for both of those every month in the form of car note, rent payments, or maybe a mortgage. Let's say that you house hack your place of residency and now you have a form of income. Now, yes, it's still a liability, but if that cash flow is higher than that liability is no longer a liability, and it's now considered an asset because it puts money into your bank account. And on the same token, if you use your car for business and write it off as taxes, now that car is no longer a liability, it's an asset. Because you're using it for business, it helps you make money. Understanding the difference between an asset and a liability will help you more in life than when you learn the difference between an independent and a dependent variable in school. And with all that being said, thank you, and make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Make sure you go watch some of our other videos to help you increase your financial literacy and understand better money management. And be sure to tune in next time when we come back to help you manage your money.